Thank you. The theme of my talk this morning is captured in a passage from Eleanor Roosevelt's book, You Learn by Living. She wrote, "People can surmount what seems to be total defeat, difficulties too great to be borne, but it requires the capacity to readjust endlessly to the changing conditions of life." I am delighted to be here with the Inova Fairfax medical community to tell you that I am grateful. I am grateful to you because when it became your turn to fight and care for me, you did, and as a result, I'm surviving because of you. Now, before I talk about our fight together, I will share with you my story of the changing conditions that occurred in my life and the readjustments that I had to make to get to you, and along the way, you'll learn why I needed you. I was born and raised in the District of Columbia. My brother and I attended a high school which had a mandatory ROTC program. Here we are in 1975 on the occasion of his graduation. Earlier that spring, I had participated for the very first time on the school's track and field team. I discovered that I had enough strength and speed to run the fastest in the 400-meter event. That put me in the track and field championships that year, where I placed second in that event. I was very encouraged by that placement given my lack of experience and training, and figured that the following year I could win the event with more experience and training. I also knew that the kid that beat me was a graduating senior. And so I prepared all summer long, running for a track club here in the District of Columbia, and entered the fall of my senior year feeling pretty good. I have been designated lieutenant colonel in charge of the regimental band. I have been elevated to first cheer in the trumpet section of the concert band. And here I am now with my fellow students after being inducted into the class of 1976 National Honor Society. I was 16 years old in both those photographs. I just want to pause a moment to see whether people can recall what it was like to be 16 and the things that were most important to you. Sometimes they weren't the same things most important to your parents, but so anybody want to share with that?
Hanging out with my friends.
Hanging out with your friends, okay. I did a little bit of that, but my appearance was important to me. Not only my appearance, but my newfound interest in running track and field. But by the end of the following summer, I would have lost all of my hair as well as my ability to run. You see, after my 17th birthday in mid-December into the following year, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma. My left leg was amputated above the knee, and I began chemotherapy treatment, all at the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. And looking back now, I know that that was the first time I was faced with the choice between fight or flight. There really wasn't much of a choice. We had to fight. I was a healthy 17-year-old. I felt good at the time, even though I hadn't received that diagnosis. And when I found out that by fighting, there are a community of hands that will fight with you. In my case, it was my family, of course, my friends, and then, of course, the medical community at NIH. I remember that there was one nurse there that was a mother of a kid that was in the band in my high school, and she watched out after me whenever I was on the ward for treatment or just there for any other procedure. In fact, she did more than that. When the annual band trip came around and the band was going to London, England my senior year, I insisted that I needed to be there. After all, I was a student leader in charge of the band. No one ever told me no. In fact, they did just the opposite. My dad volunteered to go, as well as this nurse as parent chaperone. It was a difficult trip getting around, but I was just happy to be there with my bandmates. Now, shortly before graduation, on a routine exam, I learned that the cancer had metastasized to both lungs. They operated on my left lung first, but I was able to recover in time to make it to graduation and graduate on time, and in fact, play my trumpet one last time. So off I went into the summer, my first summer without a leg. What a difference a year made. One summer I'm running up and down the East Coast in track meets. Now this summer I'm suffering from severe phantom pain and having difficulty keeping the prosthetic on given the humidity and the sweat caused by the humidity in this region. But I muscled through it, and I intended to continue with my plans to go away to school. I was accepted to Brandeis University that had recruited me for track, but my academics were sufficient enough to keep me there. And so I went off. They operated on my right lung before I left and gave me a schedule of chemotherapy treatment that I would have to come home to every month. But I planned to go, and I went anyway. So here I am, I'm bald, I'm away from home for the first time, walking around with a prosthetic. I think that's probably was different than most freshmen at that time. At least I had different issues. And so it was pretty hard to emotionally bond with anybody at that time. So that's when I started writing in a journal. And I would come home monthly, and this went on into the second semester when I learned that the cancer had returned to the left lung. More surgery, more chemotherapy, and it was at that time that I made a decision that I needed to make an adjustment. You see, by that time I was exhausted. I'm going back and forth every month, not really participating in school activities, and I was a little bit discouraged, going to know when this was going to end. And so I decided to, the following semester, enroll in Maryland, University of Maryland, and live at home. Because my goal now was to graduate on time with the class of 1980. At the time I was in the University of Maryland, I did finish the chemotherapy treatment, and I did graduate on time with the class of 1980. You see, because the National Institute of Health and their medical community fought and cared for me, I was able to survive cancer. Now, having survived a life-threatening illness at such a young age sort of sped things up for me. And I'm going to go through what happened very quickly. I went to law school, graduated in 1983, did a one-year clerkship, and in 1984 I joined the prosecutor's office in the District of Columbia, and I got married. I continued to thrive in my professional career, but sometime during that 4-year period I was a prosecutor, my wife and I decided to make a family without success. But on a routine visit to NIH, I was speaking to a nurse, and she asked me if I was married, and I said yes. And then she asked if we had any children. I told her that no, we had been trying. And then she recommended that I go get a test. And I recall specifically what she said, which was, it wouldn't be uncommon, given your chemotherapy history, that could be having some effect on your ability to conceive. And I was testing them. Of course, the nurse was right. Aren't you always right? So that marriage didn't last. I won't get into all the reasons why. But by the time I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, after 4 years, we separated and eventually divorced. I continued with my career until 1992, when a vacancy became available on the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I hadn't thought about being a judge by that time. I was 33 years old and only 9 years out of law school, but my dad urged me to apply. He thought that I can do it. He thought I was mature enough to do the job, but I also knew that he wanted me to apply because he had aspired to be a judge. He had an opportunity when we were fighting cancer to become one, but he passed on it. So I thought also I had to do it for him. Otherwise, I would not have become a judge, but for that. I was appointed an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia in 1992. I remarried the same year. And everything was going pretty well. Doing that, I was rising as a judicial officer, taking on leadership positions, presiding over difficult cases. And in my personal life, my wife and I adopted and were raising 2 children. But then about September of 2006, I began experiencing shortness of breath. On one occasion, I jumped in a cab and went to George Washington Medical Center in the District of Columbia. I went there because 20 years earlier, my father had undergone triple bypass heart surgery there, and his cardiologist was there. He met me there, so did his cardiologist, and I had an echocardiogram for the very first time. And what we learned surprised that my father had heart disease, and he couldn't pass any stress tests. And what we learned surprised us. we were told that it was the chemotherapy that was having an effect on my heart. I know now we call it chemotherapy-induced cardiomyopathy. But back then, it didn't really mean a lot to me because I was told that the symptoms would be treated with medicine. So I want to show you my dad because my dad and I, our favorite pastime was attending football games. We're suffering fans, but we attend anyway. But I wanted to show you him because he's been my mentor in life, my mentor in law, but sadly, the following month, he passed away of his third heart attack. But he left me with a legacy of strength and courage, and he demonstrated by example how to live with a chronic heart problem, and that's what I did. In fact, in 2008, when the current chief judge took senior status, I applied for the position and was designated chief judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Now, before I talk about the 8 years as chief judge as it related to my health and what went on with my health during that time, I want to give you some idea of what it's like to be a chief judge. First, I'll describe a story, and then we'll have a fun illustration. Now, we'll get to them in a minute, so just don't pay attention. Let me give you the story, but we are going to talk about our friends here, okay? All right, the story is this. As chief judge, I had office hours. Every week, I would have open office hours where any member of the community can come to see the chief judge without an appointment or even a member of the court family. And often we would see members of the community, and they typically wanted one or two things to happen. They wanted me to change the judge's decision in their case or remove the judge from their case. It's always happened that way. I would explain to them that my authority doesn't extend to changing the judge's decision or removing them from their case because under the law, they are independent decision makers in their courtroom, and my authority doesn't allow for that. Most of the community members, they accepted that, thanked me for my time, were very grateful. But I remember one because she left me with a question. She asked, if you can't change the decision of the judge on my case or remove the judge from my case, then why do they call you the chief judge? And if you think about that. So let me see if I explain it a little differently. And you have to understand cats to understand this illustration. So I'm going to ask, how many of you have cats in the audience? Pretty much you live with cats, so you'll follow this pretty good. I want to introduce you to two members of our cat family. Now, the larger one, which I think is on my left, so it's Flynn. Flynn lives with me. I don't know what he's mixed with. He's sort of the domesticated short-haired cat that we get here in America. He's got all kinds of things. He's going to represent in this illustration all of the attorneys who aspire to become judges, because we're a diverse group of people, prosecutors, public defenders, the gamut of people. Now, Collie, she's the other little one there, Collie. She lives with a special friend of mine in the same building, but in a different apartment. Now, she has her own identity, so she's going to represent all the lawyers once they become judges. Now, she's tiny in that photograph, but I'm just curious if anyone can tell what breed of cat she is from the photo. You can guess, you can't be wrong in this illustration, so. Well, she does have a specific identity. She's a Maine Coon. So she's gonna grow probably bigger than Flynn. And I've seen them together, and she is dominating even at his age. But the whole point is this. She lives with a friend of mine in the same building. Now, when we put on our robes, we become judges. We have this specific identity now. So just call us the honorables. Now, this is us. We're sitting in our own space in the same building, thinking independently of each other and thinking about the independent decisions we're going to make that affect the lives of others. Now, the job of the chief judge. As chief judge, it's your responsibility to persuade, convince the judges that while they're independent in their decision-making, that we're dependent upon each other to serve the community properly. And the best way of doing that is as a team. Now, the Urban Dictionary, if you have a look at that, describes something involving the coordination of different people to be as difficult as herding cats. So I guess I'm saying in a roundabout way, managing judges is as difficult as herding cats. Now, imagine having to do that as your health starts to decline. And as I said, I was doing fine on the medicine until about September 2011, when there was the first sign that the conditions in my life were about to change. While speaking at the colleague's retirement party, my defibrillator fired for the first time. The defibrillator had been implanted at the suggestion of my cardiologist when he learned I had become chief judge. He told me, Lee, I would rather you get upset with me by requiring you to undergo this 20 years later than not to be able to get upset with me at all. And obviously he was right. And so, but that was followed 2 months later, the Monday after Thanksgiving Day weekend. While in chambers, I started experiencing symptoms of a stroke. Severe headache, numbness on my left side, and slurred speech. Fortunately, my special counsel at the time recognized these symptoms and endowed the EMTs who came to get me and rushed me to George Washington Medical Center. I was there in time to receive the TPA, but that did not take care of the problem. So in a procedure that you probably all know about, they went up and extracted the clot. And then I was left in the capable hands of the ICU nurses and the nurses in the stroke ward. And I was discharged 10 days later without any cognitive deficit and just slight weakness in my left arm. You see, because the medical community at George Washington fought and cared for me, now I've survived a stroke. Now, the following year, I took time off over the holidays and went back to work the following year. And I can only describe the next year to year and a half as a year of undiagnosed pain, loss of appetite, and loss of weight. That went on to about June of 2013, when I was admitted into George Washington Medical Center and put in the ICU. And that was the first time that I underwent a right cath. The results were obviously poor, showed the heart that was failing, but I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time, because it was there I met a member of your community, Dr. Gunther Pandrath, and he brought me to you, and your leg of this medical relay began. The first person I met, and I'm so glad to see he's here today, is Dr. Desai, the director at the Transplant Center. Now, he's got a nice sense of humor. Now that I see they're here, I'm going to modify this speech. I'll get to you in a minute, Dr. Bogart. But anyway, well, he greeted me with, I'm happy to meet you, Judge. Your reputation precedes you. Now, it's running through my mind, he doesn't know me. I'm in the district. And, people have different reputations about me. So I didn't know. But it was just a setup line for what he wanted to tell me, which was, but so did your echocardiogram. And he explained to me for the first time how sick I was, and how I needed a heart, and the way to get there was the bridge. I had to have the bridge, the LVAD, the heart pump to get there. And then I met the dynamite, as I call her, Dr. Bogart, who's here as well, Linda Bogart. Now, I'd heard that she was fairly new to your community at that time, but I've never told her this, but I saw it as a good sign that my surgeon was a woman. And I'm gonna explain that to you. You see, in my 25 years of being a judge, over the 20 law clerks that I've hired, only one has been a male. Out of my 8 years of being chief judge, all 5 members of staff of mine are women. So I'm used to being told what to do by women and cared for by women. So I thought it was a dynamite sign. I saw it as a very good sign. Yeah. Well, she took me through what must have been a very difficult surgery, because I was intubated for a period of time. I don't even remember how long afterwards. My post-op recovery was pretty difficult. I describe it as dreams, delusions, and atrophy. While I was under, I dreamt a lot. I dreamt horrible things. I dreamt my mother was ill. I dreamt that my nephew was going off to college that year, had lost his arm and was there in the hospital with me. And then I dreamt that the Washington Post reporter who covered the court was at Fairfax looking for me, in fact, made it to my room. Now, you think that's something? I dreamt that I got an email from the director here saying that the heart was available and that you guys wouldn't let me go to get a heart. Because, see, I thought I was somewhere else. And the nurses would tell me, you're already here at Fairfax. And if there was a heart available, we would be doing the workup for you. So I can tell you our heart's not available. I even threatened one that I would call the U.S. Marshal in the District of Columbia and have them come out and get me. And I thought I did. But as I came out and I was taken out the ventilator, I kept believing that the things I dreamt were true. In fact, it wasn't until my siblings brought my mother to see me that I realized that she wasn't as ill as I thought. It wasn't until my sister brought a recent photograph of my nephew that I realized that he had all of his limbs. And really, it wasn't until my special counsel visited me in the hospital. And I asked her, could you go through my iPad and look for that email? And she took a little bit of time, and then she turned to me with a sad face and said, there's nothing there, Chief. And so I started to realize that these things just weren't happening. I would call the nurses by the names of people that I work with. They would politely correct me, always very polite. Essentially, someone will say, we know this isn't you. We've given you a lot of medicine. That's what's causing it. And as I came out of it, though, my body had atrophy. I couldn't walk by myself, eat by myself, or even raise my left arm, which was now a little worse. This was one that was weakened in the stroke, but it was worse than after the surgery. But I was left in the capable hands of ICU, nurses, the LVAD coordinators, and of course the physical therapist. And eventually I got better and I was discharged. I did a couple of weeks of National Rehabilitation Center in the district and went back to work. So I started walking what I call that bridge to transplant. And things were pretty good. The bridge was pretty stable until about September of 2015. While sitting at home alone in my apartment with Flynn, of course, my defibrillator fired 10 times in 10 minutes. I was rushed to MedStar, and I always thought of MedStar as like a layover to my final destination, which was always here. See, a year earlier, I had broken a bone in my leg and went there, and you guys came to get me for that. Now, they took that personally. One judge said, we can fix it, and one of the doctors, but you came to get me. So I knew you were coming to get me after that VTech storm. And of course, you did. I came out here, sort of got stabilized, and eventually discharged, but was monitored very closely after that. Until about October of 2015 when I was told, and I believe Dr. May is here, I believe he made the decision to bring me in. He didn't tell me why he was bringing me in. I knew I was doing poorly, but he said, they told me, he and my LVAD coordinator, to go to work, we'll call you when a bed is available and come to the hospital. I knew I was going to be put on medicine. I expected to be Milleron that I was going to be put on, so I knew it was serious. So I packed my bags, I said goodbye to Flynn, hoping that I'd see him again, but I knew that the conditions of my life were about to change. I just didn't know which direction the change was going. On the day I was told to come in, I settled in, and that evening a nurse comes in with a cell phone, and she says, it's my doctor. Now I have to say, I wonder why is he calling me on a nurse's cell phone when I'm in the hospital? He's got to know I'm here, but it was Dr. Shah, I believe, and he had a nice calm voice. He's a little bit like Dr. Desai. He's got a little good setup. He first asked me, how are you doing? I'm wondering, well, I'm in the hospital. What do you think, how am I doing? But again, that was again just his setup for what he really had to tell me. And then he said the magic words, the words I've been waiting to hear for 2.5 years. We have a heart for you. And it turned out to be the heart of a young man named Christopher Canales. He was 23 years old at the time, and he had suffered a massive asthma attack. He was in Prince George's County, Maryland. And then in comes Dr. Bogart again, performing the surgery. And only 2 weeks later, I'm sitting with her, having a photograph taken with her on the day of my discharge. And that was a special day for me to be there with Dr. Bogart. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I say to you, because of you, I was able to complete my term, my 8th year as chief judge, and speak to the court family one last time at a celebration of my leadership. Because of you, a month later, I was able to meet the donors' parents. And I learned in that room that that was not the first time we had met. Not met, the first time we had been in a room together. You see, the first time occurred earlier in the year. doing a public swearing in of one of my new colleagues. As chief judge, it was my responsibility to conduct the public swearing in ceremony in the atrium of our courthouse. It turned out that she was a personal friend of my donor's parents. So they were there in the audience. I didn't know they were in the audience, and they did not know that the reason I was standing on the podium is because their son's heart was beating in my chest. And finally, because of you, I had a chance meeting in the lobby of my building with a very special lady who's here, Amy Lou. You met her cat earlier. She's the owner of that nasty Maine Coon on the road right there. We bonded and became close friends over caring for each other's cats and then each other. And then we partnered in the birth of the book, Courageous Warriors, Overcoming Obstacles to Inspire and Lead. Now, we wrote this book for the following reasons, for three of them. One, to highlight the need to improve cancer treatment for children diagnosed with cancer. After all, that's what got me to you. Two, to highlight the urgency to protect childhood cancer survivors from the late effects of their cancer treatment. As you heard, it was about 30 years later that I began experiencing shortness of breath. I was monitored by NIH for a few years into college, and then I was declared cured and did not return to a hospital until that day in 2006. And the final reason is this: as I've learned that the LVAD has been so successful in extending the life of heart failure patients that the list is around, 4,000 a year, but the available hearts has not increased. I want to bring attention to the fact that we ask that more people be like Christopher and register as a donor and give their gift for life to somebody who you may not ever meet, but I'm here to tell you today, will be forever grateful for what you've given. So I want to thank my medical relay team of NIH, George Washington, and of course, Inova Fairfax for that exhaustive race through the DMV, the older people refer to as the metropolitan area, to the finish line. You brought me here healthier and stronger than I was before I started. And I want to conclude by sharing some similarities that I've observed between spending so much time in your facilities and in the court system. First, most of the people that come to our building wish they didn't. Now, they come to the court because we have the legal expertise to determine the conflict, the issue, and provide a legal remedy, a just remedy. They come to you because you have the medical expertise to diagnose their medical problem and provide appropriate treatment. Now, I've even seen similarities in your emergency rooms in our jails. Really. There are people in both that could be better served somewhere else in the facility. Could be better treated somewhere else. And finally, there's a similarity in what we both try to do. We both try to achieve the best outcomes for the people that require our services, even though we know that's not possible in every case. There are a lot of things outside of our control. For instance, I tell new judges that you can make the correct decision in a criminal case to release somebody pending trial based on the law and the facts. That person still may go out and hurt somebody. It doesn't mean you didn't do your job, because we're in the business of predicting human behavior, and you cannot predict human behavior with 100% certainty. Likewise, in your case, you can have another patient just like me and bring them to the point where you brought me, but a heart doesn't come available in time for that person to survive. Certainly doesn't mean you didn't do the best job possible. You gave that individual a chance at surviving. It just so happened with me, I was able to get one in time. And I'm here today for one reason only, to say to you, because you fought and cared for me, I can now say I survived heart failure. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to you, and thank you for the gift of your time.
Go ahead. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. your story's not inspirational. The way you went through it is actually inspirational. And I do think that there's a variety of questions that we always have that staff members ask. You experience healthcare from the other side.
Yes.
And you've actually, unfortunately, had a breadth of experience throughout the course of your life over many decades in many institutions. And your experience and the successful therapy you undergo is so dependent on all these people that sit here.
Yes.
What is it that makes a successful experience versus one that is not so great?
And that's hard to say. I can only speak from, going to different facilities and coming here, and I've seen some of the nurses I think that treated me here and other people, but I have to say there are two things that struck me here that I hadn't seen other places, and I didn't put this in the speech, but now I have a question I want to share that said they were meaningful to me. It made me feel like I was part of your family. When I was told about the heart, I was told I needed to go down to the ICU to get prepared, because I was on the third floor at the time. As I was rolled out the third floor, the nurses started to applaud. That was very special. It made me feel that, and it made me feel that good things were going to happen because they were applauding. But it didn't stop there. As I was we had a delay in the surgery, and so when it came time for the surgery and I was moving down to the operating room, the nurses in ICU started to applaud as well. And I almost cried when that happened. And I went in, I didn't see Dr. Bogart, but at the end of it, I looked around for the pump and I figured she must have been there. And so see, one of the things for me, I'm just not in the business of complaining. I never complained about that pump, but realized a couple of things that would make a difference with it. My biggest day here in the hospital, and people think this is strange, was after I had the heart surgery transplant and I was able to take a shower. I didn't take one for 2.5 years with the pump. Now, I was clean though, but I didn't take a shower, and I was used to doing that because I wear a prosthetic leg. When I shower, I don't wear it because it'll get damaged. Yes, I had the shower bag, but I thought it was too dangerous for me to be standing up there on one leg with this bag and taking a shower, so I didn't take it. So it was a big day when I took a shower because it's been 2.5 years, and it's things like that that you celebrate. You have a very good staff here. When I started walking again after the surgery with the 2 physical therapists, we sat down and we all cried. And that was another meaningful day when I was walking again after the pump surgery. But, I just know that you did it. And I've been to other places, and what I found about those places like GW and here, it's part of the therapy is the ability to smile at the patient and greet the patient. You guys do it here. That was important to me. In fact, when I came back from the stroke incident, I told my staff I created a slogan, more smiling, less complaining. And I told them that's what they do in the hospital as part of therapy. They smile because you can't help but smile back at somebody if they smile at you unless something's wrong with you. And so I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I feel about it.
I think it absolutely does. I think the other part of your story, which is very motivational, and we try to share it with others, and is that you, despite all of these healthcare conditions, you went and you continued with your goals, your job, your career. What did that provide for you, and what advice do you give to others that are going through medical conditions who don't have the motivation?
It gave me strength. I ran into difficulties with some of the judges because I became more direct. And you explained it to me once. You said, if you don't have all that oxygen and blood going to you, you're going to be a little different. But judges didn't, those cats didn't like that. But what they didn't understand is that they were helping me fight. I needed to be there. I was never that kind of person when I was a young man that sat at home waiting for the phone call from the girl. So I couldn't wait for a phone call from the heart, for the heart. I had to work. And so they were part of my therapy, even though it may have been difficult on them because I became more direct during that time. And so that's how I've been able to strive. I just keep on going. I saw it, as I said, with my father. He didn't stop until the day he passed. And the day he passed, he was headed off to the golf course.
I think one of the other pieces is that you're successfully out from all of this medical therapy. We used to see each other every day, and now I see you maybe once every 6 months to a year.
As Mary Beth says, I'm boring.
You are boring, yeah.
I like being boring.
Talk about a little bit of, you went through all these things to get to this point. What is your life like after all of these therapies and after transplant now?
Well, it's a transition because back to my personal life. And, I did not think, I wasn't sure if I was going to get to this side. So I really didn't make any plans for what I would do when I took senior status. But the first thing I started focusing on was the book for the reasons that I want to do all I can to help other people that come to see you guys and help you have more success in what you're doing by advocating in these areas. And so I'm still working part-time as a judge because my daughter's in her final year of college, going into that, got to pay for that. But I'm moving more out of being a judicial officer. I've done it for 25 years. I want to use my talents and skill in other areas. I met some very special people like Amy. Where's Amy? Raise your hand, Amy. Talk to her. She's been a lifeline in our building. Thank you very much, and she's here today. But anyway, I'm still in transition. I tell people you physically get there, but you have to emotionally get there too. And that takes a little longer than the physical part. The physical part, you see I'm all here. I was 125 pounds when I had the surgery. I'm 155 now. I work out every other day, 30 minutes on the treadmill and then lightweight lifting. I feel really good, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question of Judge Satterfield?
What's my name?
Not Judge.
Will I embarrass you, Dr. May, if I tell a story? No, I'm not going to tell that story.
Here's a microphone in case you need one.
They all know. Can I tell this story? And I'll ask the question, but this is a great story. I mean, it really is. I wear a prosthetic, right? It's on my left leg. The cardiologists like to check for water, right? So I'm in, and he gets grief by this. I didn't put it in the book, though. I should have. But Amy was like, why didn't you tell me about that? And so he's checking my left leg until I remind him, you're not going to feel any water down there. It's all. Anyway, you're a wonderful man. Thank you. What's that? Yeah, I didn't know what I was talking about, right? No, I'm sorry. Are there questions?
Yeah, just a quick one. And first of all, thank you so much for your extremely moving and story. It's really amazing. What advice would you give to someone who's just about to go in for cardiac surgery, for a transplant?
I'm not good on giving advice in this kind of area, other than I can just tell you how I was. I always had adopted a theory that I would wait to worry until you guys told me something was wrong. And I just kept going with my life but one thing I would give advice to any patient that just follow what your doctors say. That's what I did. The doctors would tell you. I did everything they asked me to do. Especially Dr. Bogart.
Sort of nodding his head about that.
I'm sorry.
I also want to thank you for coming. I found it very encouraging and inspiring. You mentioned one time when you were discouraged. I think you were in college. You had gotten discouraged. But many years later, through that time, were there any other points where you got discouraged or?
Oh, certainly. When I got hit with that VTech storm, I didn't know when that was going to stop. And I was alone in my apartment at the time. And after that, I knew. I just didn't know what was coming. But I knew then. I mean, we're not, we can feel it. You can feel the progression of failure coming on with the shortness of breath and the moving around. So I was discouraged during that time because you just don't know. But the way I dealt with it again was continue to work until you told me to come in the hospital.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Been through a lot. I cannot even imagine being in your shoes. But I'm wondering, do you have any suggestions? Is there anything that you, throughout all these experiences in medical facilities, is there anything that you feel as a patient could have been done better?
I mean,
I
try to think about that, and I would answer if I can tell you something, but I don't make anything up about it because I've had really good experiences. I've been fortunate. I think it's because we live in this region We got good medical care in this region because I've been through the whole region, Maryland, Virginia, and D.C., so I can tell you that. But, I mean, there are personalities everywhere, but I always saw the nurses and the techs and all those people as part. I've spent so time with you. I saw it as a family, so I'm sure I was rough on a few when I was delusional, I say. I used to tell the judges when I was tough on them, I lost a few brain cells. And my special counsel said, stop telling them that. They're going to believe it was true. But the point is, I mean, I really don't have a lot of advice. I don't have any negative critics. I can't think of any time where I felt annoyed at anybody during my treatment. I mean, all the doctors were fine. They were straight up. And then I don't like to criticize publicly anyway. Any one institution. I did go through a whole year of undiagnosed pain. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you again. My question to you is, healthcare is interdisciplinary, and as an RN, as we try to help bring support to you, to our patients outside the hospital, how do we better incorporate, or how did your family get incorporated into your care and other people to help support you once you discharge from the hospital between episodes of care?
Well, my marital family supported me, but they were pretty much destroyed by that. My kids had a difficult time and still recovering from that. The woman I was married to at the time, we are now divorced. We're friends, but we're divorced. It just didn't survive it. And I see Kathy here, and Kathy told me early on that that's not an uncommon thing that may happen, that families go through things in those kind of crises. And it happened to us, but that's what has happened. But she was very supportive during the time, and until she had enough. Well, essentially, best I could say, I'm not going to be overly critical here, but just to say she had enough. Read the book if you want to know more. All right. Good for that, right.
All right. Well, if there are no others, thank you all for attending, and Judge Satterfield,
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure coming back with something like this.